Now, before getting started, do be warned there will be spoilers in this video for the latest episode of The Mandalorian, that being the 7th episode of Season 3. So if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really good time to click away. Alright, and speaking of that 7th episode, which was called The Spies, well, I've seen many fans wondering, including some in my Discord, which is where I initially saw all this. Anyway, I've seen some wondering what that name or title means or who exactly it is referring to, with the most obvious answer being Elia Kane, who we have confirmed in this episode is secretly working for Gideon, as I think many of us suspected. Problem is that title is, of course, plural, meaning it seems to be or is referring to more than one person, with I think the easiest and probably most likely explanation being that the title simply refers to the whole or entire amnesty program, or the fact that there are those still loyal to the Empire virtually everywhere. We even have a member of the Shadow Council say essentially that during their meeting, that there are those still loyal to the Empire on every planet in the galaxy. However, what if the title is meant to refer to another individual, one who we haven't or can't so easily guess at being a spy? What if the title of this episode was a clue, hiding in plain sight, of another huge betrayal coming up? And what if that character is none other than the Armorer? What if she's somehow working with Gideon to rid the galaxy of the Mandalorians who do not follow the creed above all else, as she feels they should? And before really getting into it, yes, this theory certainly has some issues, but it also does have some pretty interesting evidence to back it up. So what I'll do now is try to look at it from all angles, though I'll be honest up front and say I don't think this is likely, but I also don't think this is completely impossible. And personally, I'm a big fan of the character as she is, as the very strict Mandalorian who follows the creed to the letter above all else that she seems to be. Which is actually maybe evidence that she would betray Bo-Katan and those who follow her, or that she's setting them up, that the reason she embraced Bo-Katan as a leader in the first place and wanted her to return to Mandalore was to lead them right into a trap, to lead them right into Gideon's waiting arms. And so what if, a few episodes back now, when the Armorer asked Bo-Katan to remove her helmet, which initially caused Bo-Katan to hesitate because she obviously knew that was clearly breaking the creed and thus refused to do it at first, before, of course, the Armorer responded by asking if she respected her station or not. What if that was simply a test, a failed test, to see if Bo would put the creed above all else or not, even above the commands of someone of the Armorer's station? I mean, in theory, this would say to the Armorer that when Bo is the leader, she'll believe she has the authority to order others to betray the creed, or that she can betray it if she wants to, that her authority will outweigh it when push comes to shove. And so after Bo failed, the Armorer's plan became for Bo to round up more Mandalorians and to lead them back to Mandalore and to Gideon to be done away with. I mean, right after Bo failed the helmet test, the Armorer basically said, hey, it's time to retake Mandalore. And this might make one immediately ask, how, when, and why did the Armorer make a deal with Moff Gideon? Well, it could be that the Armorer was captured by Gideon or his forces during the events of Season 1, at some point when the rest of the Mandalorian covert had been killed, and it's very likely that Gideon would want her alive and have need of a Mandalorian armorer, considering his new Dark Trooper suits that we see him wearing in this episode, that they're made of Beskar, and of course an armorer would know the secrets of working that type of metal. And we do know there is a secret to it, probably many of them, but we've seen the Armorer pour the living waters into the quenching fluid, which sure could just be a tradition or some sort of ceremony or something along those lines, or it could be some sort of kind of magical secret ingredient, if you will, that gives the Beskar some of its special properties or reinforces them. And yes, I'm sure there are plenty of other little tricks, tips, and techniques to working Beskar that the Mandalorians have kept to themselves forever, and that Gideon would of course need to know to make these effective Dark Trooper suits, or even the ones for the troopers that we see in the episode. And so in exchange for these secrets, Gideon not only lets her live, but promises to let the Creed Mandalorians be, to leave them alone and allow them to rebuild their society as they see fit, with no interference and maybe even some help from the Empire. It could even be when showing or teaching Gideon the secrets of working Beskar, or showing his armorers the secrets, that she even forges him a helmet to prove she's not lying about how it's done. And this helmet that she makes for him just so happens to have horns on it like her own, because yeah, it is interesting to note they both have horns on their helmet, not unlike how those who followed Maul back in the day had similar looking helmets. Yet another interesting note here is that apparently the Mandalorians who lived on the moon of Concordia did not suffer the same fate as those who lived on Mandalore itself. The moon was not destroyed or glassed like Mandalore was. We also know, as seen in Rebels, that some Mandalorians did side with or joined with the Empire, and I suppose it's not impossible that the armorer, who is from Concordia, was one of them, which would also explain why she's working with Gideon, though that doesn't exactly explain why she'd be okay with him having slaughtered her covert, again, as seen in Season 1. And before getting to what I feel is the biggest issue or maybe strike against this theory, this could actually be done for a very good reason in story, or for the story, not just for shock value or to subvert our expectations. Because in the latest episode, we see that Din Djarin pledges his loyalty to Bo-Katan, that he values honor, loyalty, and character pretty much above all else, maybe even above the creed, especially if he learns in the finale that the armor valuing the creed above all else, in a sense, has led to her betraying the others. This could even be the reason why Gideon wanted Din Djarin left alive and to be brought to his debriefing room, to be able to tell him that he'd been betrayed by the one he trusted most, to sort of, rub it in his face like evil villains like to do sometimes. And all this eventually could lead to Din not following the creed so strictly and removing his helmet in the future because he's seen what strict obedience to it can lead to instead of strict obedience to the people you trust and are loyal to you. Though I don't know about that because it would require Pedro Pascal to be on set a lot more often than he likely is. Either way, this would also sort of explain why the armorer is currently betraying some of her own or most loyal, including Din and Paz Vizsla, because she is, or did if this theory is true, she led them right into the trap to be killed, and we saw that Paz was indeed killed. But perhaps she sees their volunteering for the mission to help Bo-Katan retake Mandalore as proof that they would ultimately follow her over the creed if push ever came to shove, if Bo ever tried to lift the rule of having to wear helmets, or any other rule I suppose, as the one true ruler of Mandalore. However, perhaps the biggest problem with all of this is the timing of it all, because it seems as if the armorer comes up with this plan to lead Bo-Katan and the others into a trap before Gideon even knows about what happened on Navarro. He only learns about it from Elia Kane at the start of this latest episode, and you'd think if she was going to do this, she would have first contacted Gideon, or vice versa, that Gideon would have heard that the Mandalorians had teamed up, and he then would have contacted her and told her or asked her what's going on, and then to lead them into the trap. And it is interesting to note just how angry Gideon seemed to be when he learned that they had teamed up, again at the start of this episode, that Bo-Katan's Mandalorians had joined up with Din Djarin's cult, that he basically said this cannot be, that they're sworn enemies, and he may have figured that perhaps the armorer was betraying him, which is why he was so upset. Until, of course, the armorer brought them all there to Mandalore to his secret base and served them up on a platter, you could say. This could even lead to the reason why she left in the middle of the mission, or shortly before getting to Gideon's secret base. She said she was taking the wounded or the too weak to fight back to the fleet, but she was really doing that in order to get back to her own people, to the ones who are loyal to the creed, in order to get them out right before Gideon launched his attack. And honestly here, I really don't know about this one. Part of me says this is the worst theory ever, and there's no way it would ever happen. But another part of me says it's the perfect way to move Din away from the creed, that his pledging his loyalty to Bo-Katan was a first step to a big sort of character change, and the armorer's betrayal would be a giant shove in that direction. But I can't help but feel like that upon further scrutiny, or when getting into the finer details even further than I tried to do here, that there's going to be even more flaws or cracks in this theory, other things that just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, which I'm sure some will find and point out in the comments below, just as I'm sure some might find more evidence to include in the comments below. Either way, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about this, or add your evidence for or against. And is this something that would be good for the story? Is this a good twist? Is it a good way to maybe change the course of Din's story? Or is this insane and there's no way it will ever happen? Whatever you think, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.